Kind of switching gears, as someone myself that loves movies, there's an aspect of movie that never gets old. Some things like, this is like, come on, like this again. Something will never get old is a good plot twist. These are powerful storytelling tools that flip our expectations, force us to kind of see the story in a whole new light, a whole different way. At least that's what a good plot twist does. It doesn't just shock us, but it kind of redefines everything that has come before it. You see that twist, you're like, oh my goodness, I have to rewatch it to see how that led to that moment, right? It rewards careful viewers and sparks endless conversations as the credits roll. And in my life, I've seen plenty of plot twists. So spoilers for movies that came out a while ago. The Empire Strikes Back, I would argue, is probably the greatest plot twist ever, right? It's one of the most embedded in our entire culture, like so much so that we get the wording wrong. Luke, I am your father. Didn't happen. He says, no, I am your father. Anyway, that's a different conversation. But I wish I was alive to be in that theater, to experience that and see that moment of that twist and be like, oh my goodness, this changes literally everything. Another plot twist is the original Planet of the Apes movie, right? They're trying to figure out where they are, what planet they're on, and the end of the movie ends with seeing the Statue of Liberty. They're on Earth, actually, like blowing their minds. Christopher Nolan, one of the best working filmmakers today, is known for his mind-bending films, whether it's Inception, where the movie ends, you don't know whether what we watched is real or fake. The Prestige movie that twists and reframes an entire rivalry between these two people. Interstellar is a surprise and a twist grounded in love and sacrifice. There's a romantic comedy called Crazy Stupid Love that has like the funniest plot twist I've ever seen in my entire life. And I can't spoil it because, I like laugh before it starts. It's so good. And I know it's coming. But one of the biggest is, and some would argue this is like the first major one, was the movie Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. The twist at the end of the movie where we see that Norman Bates is actually the one that is acting as his mother, committing these atrocities and these murders. And last month, I got to go to the Hollywood Theater with one of my good buddies and got to watch it with a crowd of people in theaters. And before the movie started, someone came up with a microphone. They're like, who here has not seen this movie? And like half the people raised their hand. And I was like, whoa, that's surprising, but awesome. And then keep your hand up if you don't know what happens. If you don't know what the twist is, you don't know nothing. He didn't say twist because then you think there's a twist coming. But still, half the room. And so I got to watch. I had seen the movie before, and I got to watch, including my friend who had no idea, that at the end of the movie when this all comes to fruition, there's this big twist. The whole room just exploded. Just, oh my goodness, what's going on? And after talking to my friend, he's like, this changes everything. Like, this changes the entire movie. Like, what do I do with this information? Like, oh my goodness. He couldn't stop talking about it, our ride home from Portland. He's like, I need to rewatch this immediately. And that's what a plot twist does, right? It changes everything about how we experience what we had just been seeing or experiencing. And when we look at our passage today, we see something similar. A moment where the very presence of Jesus begins to shift everything, right? It's almost like a plot twist, right? He doesn't just fit into the existing framework, he challenges it. His presence redefines things. His authority transforms how they're practiced. And this leads to our main idea, and it's simple. So if you're taking notes, main idea this morning is that Jesus changes everything. Simple. Jesus changes everything. This is not just a phrase. It's a reality that upends our expectations. It rewrites rules. It reframes how we understand God, ourselves, and the world. It's like stepping into a story that you thought you knew, only to realize that everything is about to change, right? He doesn't just tweak things. He completely transforms them. He changes everything. And we got two movements this morning. And so our first movement in verses 18 through 22 is that Jesus' presence transforms ritual into relationship. Let's read 18 through 20. Now, John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. And people came and said to him, why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus said to them, can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and they will fast in that day. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. If he does, the patch tears it away, the new from the old, and the worse tear is made. No one puts new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is destroyed. And so are the skins. But new wine is for fresh wineskins. Our text today begins with people confronting and asking Jesus about John's disciples and the Pharisees' disciples, which is an interesting pairing when you look at it, because the Pharisees, John the Baptist and his disciples, right, not exactly like buddies. They're not friends. They're not like doing the same thing on purpose just because they're like, yeah, we're all on the same team here, right? They were not in cahoots. They were not close. So putting them together is a little odd. But they're put together because both of these groups were fasting. They were participating in a fast, and they're like, all right, Jesus, they're doing this, but why are your disciples not? And to these people, they're noticing what seems to be an inconsistency. They think this doesn't make any sense. And before we moved into Jesus' response, which is different than they probably expected, which is very on brand for Jesus, I think that we should briefly understand fasting. According to the Bible, fasting is a voluntary act of abstaining from food or other things to focus on God, focus on Jesus. It's not about earning favor or punishing the body, but about deepening one's relationship with God through prayer, humility, and dependence, okay? Just to clarify, intermittent fasting, not biblical fasting, okay? You might be doing it for health benefits, okay? Fasting, biblical fasting, that's for our soul. That's for our soul benefits. And I remember the first time that I ever fasted. And you're like, how do you remember that? That makes, like, why? It's not for a spiritual reason. I can't, like, thinking back, I can't believe this happened. Okay, so I was 17 at the time. I was leading middle school just in a volunteer capacity, and we went to camp. Super excited, super fun. We went to a place called Island Lake at the time, and my buddy and I we were leading together, and we were leading sixth graders. Got to camp, first night, amazing, fun, sweet, and we met our camp speaker. He was great. Next morning at the leader meeting, camp speaker comes to us at the leader meeting. He goes, I feel convicted in my spirit. I feel like God's leading me to fast the rest of camp. It's Tuesday morning. We have till Friday, okay? And he's not running around doing all these crazy things we were. And so he's like, I feel convicted. I want to take this time. He's like, so if anybody wants to, if anybody feels led to fast. And I was like, I want to be a pastor. I want to be spiritual. Let's do this. Like, let's fast. And for the next 5 days till Friday afternoon, did not eat a single thing. Obviously, I was fasting, which is a horrible idea at camp. Like, I can't, like, coming off of, like, I got back from camp on Tuesday, and I'm, like, writing about fasting. I'm like, if I did not eat the past 4 days, I might not be here today. I would probably be gone. And it was just unwise to do, right? I was just trying to do it to be spiritual. I was trying to do it to gain favor with God, or have people think that I was awesome, or like, wow, look at Rye. He's not eating. He's spending time with Jesus. Like, look how cool he is. That was my mindset with it. And I would have been categorized in the same area as the Pharisees, right? I would have been the same camp as them, just doing a religious activity just so people could praise me, or it was a ritual. It was not for relationship with Jesus, right? I was doing it all wrong, and it was the first time I ever fasted. And there's an issue with that, and that's what's being pointed out today, and that's what Jesus points out. He says, Jesus said to them, can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. And the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast in that day. Jesus uses this bridegroom, this bride language here, and it's super important to understand why. He's using this language to help us understand how the Pharisees have gotten things essentially so wrong, right? They turn fasting into this mere ritual and this practice. It's not a relation-based response. In the Old Testament, God is called the bridegroom, right? And Israel, the people of Israel, are called the bride. This is seen in passages like Isaiah 62, Hosea chapter 2, among others. So the bridegroom language is referred to God alone, not a king, not a prophet, not a rabbi, right? Just God. And so Jesus making this claim, he's claiming identity of God. He's the Messiah who is God in flesh. And this would have rocked the Pharisees at the time. This would have completely upended what everybody thought about Jesus. So if he's the bridegroom, and Jesus is that makes us, the church, the bride. We are the bride of Christ. So what was once a metaphor for God's relationship with Israel is now our new reality for our people today, right? We are the church, the bride of Christ. And so in first century Judaism, fasting had become a ritual. It was ritualized. Like the Pharisees essentially had taken what the Mosaic law was, which was you have to fast once a year. It was just leading up to Passover, the people had to fast. But what the Pharisees had done, they morphed it into this twice-a-week duty. And as one commentator put, he said that they only saw it as a badge of their personal piety, right? It was essentially to show how spiritual they were, how great they were, how good of a follower of God am I. Look at me. It was exactly what I was doing when I was at that summer camp. And so how often do we do these religious activities? Do we participate in these things just to have a spiritual checklist to check them off of our box? And the danger with these spiritual disciplines is not like prayer, scripture reading, Sabbath, fasting, is not the practice itself. The practice itself is given to us by God. They're good gifts for us. But it's the posture in which we do them. That's where we become in error. That's where we approach spiritual disciplines as obligations, something just to do, rather than an invitation to experience and be in relationship with Jesus, right? A checklist mindset with our spiritual disciplines, it turns them into just, it takes sacred rhythms and reduces them to lifeless habits. Dallas Willard, an author, pastor, says, grace is not opposed to effort, but it is opposed to learning or to earning. Right? Doing spiritual disciplines is a good thing. Participating, giving effort towards them is a good thing. But if we're doing them for the wrong reasons, if we're doing them just to earn favor with God or to check it off a list or to be like, oh, I got my Bible reading in for the day, right? We're doing them for the wrong reasons. And Jesus notices that the Pharisees are doing the same thing. He notices that John's disciples are doing the same thing. Like, hey, we're getting this wrong. And so he flips the script on it. Right? He's saying, now is not the time, because this is relation-based. This is not just a ritual. This is about me. He's saying, this is about me. So he uses the metaphor of the bride and the bridegroom. And at the time, weddings were different than they are now. It wasn't a 20 to 30-minute ceremony followed by a reception that lasted a couple hours and then where you kind of wish you didn't invite that one uncle. Like, that's not what weddings were back then. Weddings back then were a whole week-long feast celebration. And so why would you fast then? It was like if Thanksgiving was every day for us, you're not going to fast during that time, right? Jesus was saying, there's no point because I am here. Now is the time for celebration. Now is the time for joy. Now is the time to be with me. It's about relationship with him. And after he begins explaining this, and he talks about that there will be a time that I will go away, that the bridegroom will go away, and that you will fast because the relationship will be different, right? And he's talking about his own coming execution, his resurrection, and then ascension, essentially. And so he's flipping the script on everything. He's saying, this is not about ritual. This is about relationship with me. And he begins to continue on. He talks about these different metaphors of the piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. And this metaphor would be one that every single homemaker would understand, right? If a garment is washed several times and has shrunk, if then ripped, it cannot be patched with new cloth. It would only ruin it. And he uses the same type of illustration with a wineskin, where in the ancient world, a standard wineskin was goat skin. When new wine was put into the new goat skin, the wine would ferment, emitting gases that would expand and stretch the wineskin. And so if they tried to repeat that process with an old wineskin, it would burst and you would lose all the wine, the new wine and the old wineskin, right? They cannot coexist, essentially. And so this is pointing to the idea that the old and the new do not match up, right? The old way of ritual with spiritual practices and just doing them just to check them off a list, that does not coexist with the new way of Jesus. R.C. Sproul has a wonderful quote, and I want to read about this. He says this: "You cannot take the new and force it into the old structures, because the old structures cannot bear it. He was not condemning the Old Testament law of God. He was condemning the traditions that had been developed among the scribes and the Pharisees. He was warning them that their king had come. They would not be able to deal with this king unless they got rid of the structures that made it impossible for them to receive him. Something so transcendentally new had happened that they could not receive Christ into their lives without being made new themselves. It would be impossible to be a Christian and keep the old ways. Jesus is entering into this moment and being, plot twist, everything's different. Everything that you thought was happening, everything you thought I have come to bring a new way of living. Because Jesus, he changes everything. He redefines this relationship versus ritual, right? And he continues to do that, right? Jesus, his presence transforms ritual into relationship, right? That's our first movement. It reorients how we engage with these spiritual disciplines like fasting and helps us truly understand why we do them. Because Jesus, he changes everything. Now, including rest. Remember, so Jesus, he changes everything. Second movement, we're moving on to verses 23 through 28. Second thing, Jesus' authority redefines rest. Jesus' authority redefines rest. It says this, one Sabbath, he was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. And the Pharisees were saying to them, look, why are you doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath? And he said to them, have you not read what David did when he was in need and was hungry? And he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar, the high priest, and ate the bread of presence, which was not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him. And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Right? Jesus, he changes the scenery. The next moment that's happening is taking place on the Sabbath day. Jesus and his disciples, they're going through the grain fields, as the text says, and one of the disciples begins to pluck the heads of grain. And then out of nowhere, the Pharisees show up. So the Pharisees were not told about this event. Someone did not go report it to them. The Pharisees were spying on Jesus, waiting for the right moment for him to do something in their eyes that thought was wrong so that they could go and accuse Jesus of whatever it was, right? They are the Sabbath police in this instance, right? They are just like a referee in a game where they're waiting. All right, they see the infraction, blow the whistle, personal foul. Okay, Jesus is in the wrong according to the Pharisees, right? They're waiting and spying, just like with your siblings growing up, just waiting for you to do the wrong thing. And then you hear, Mom, Dad, blah, blah, blah. This, my brother would do that to me. I would do that to my brother. Like, it happens. So Pharisees are little tattletales, essentially. And so they're waiting. Jesus does this, or disciples do this, and they confront him. They charge the disciples with doing work on the Sabbath, which was considered unlawful, right? According to the Pharisees and their understanding of the law, it was okay to eat the heads of grain, but you're not allowed to pluck them. That was considered to be a no-no, right? That would be work, and it was forbidden. It was considered to be something called threshing, which was a type of work forbidden on the Sabbath. And Jesus was not a fan of this, right? He understood the law. He knew it, right? And so he pushes back against the Pharisees. He says, have you not read what David did? Which is hilarious because they have, right? Jesus knows that they've read what David did, and he's like, have you not read what David did? It's like pushing some buttons there. When he was in need and was hungry, and he and those who were with him, how he entered into the house of God in the time of Abiathar, the high priest, and ate the bread of presence, which was not lawful for any priest to eat, and also gave it to them. So what exactly is Jesus referencing here? Essentially what happens is Jesus is taking them to Bible school, right? Which they should have known, but they didn't understand, right? And it goes back to 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 1 through 6. The priests would take the bread on the Sabbath and place 12 loaves on a table in the tabernacle. And this bread was called the bread of presence. The priests, and only the priests, were the ones that were allowed to eat it during the week. They were the only ones that could touch it. But Scripture has a story about David and his companions when they were hungry, right? And so what happens is they were hungry, and they go and they take this bread. David ate the bread that only the priests could eat. So at that time, probably a big no. Do not do that. But he does this, and because they were with him, his companions also were able to take this bread and eat it. And Jesus' situation, right, has a lot in common with David. In both cases, something unlawful happens that is not judged by God as a sin. In both cases, the leader's authority enables them and the companions to take and eat something that was technically unlawful. Right? David's authority that he had as king is why he was able to partake in that. Right? And that's why the people that were with him were able to partake in that, because he had the authority to do so. And so Jesus, in the same way, has this authority, saying, I have the authority over the Sabbath. This is why my disciples are able to do this. You do not actually understand what Sabbath is. Jesus is coming back to the point that he made earlier, while also redefining what Sabbath is. He's redefining it for his audience. He's redefining it for Pharisees and for us. Jesus is once again pointing out the error that the Pharisees have. He's pointing out that these are just rules, rituals, and traditions that they were just abiding by to the law, and that's not actually the point. Jesus values, Jesus values Jesus values the relationship over ritual. He's not concerned. Oh, we're back. Praise God. Oh my goodness. He's pointing out that these rituals and traditions and additions to the law are not what's important. That he values relationship over ritual, right? He values the relationship with his people over the seemingly mindless task that we're doing just because we want to do it, just because it's a thing to check off a list. To call a spade, what's being addressed here is legalism, right? Same thing that's addressed earlier. Jesus continuing to confront and correct the Pharisees in their legalism, right? And legalism is all about earning. It's all about performing. It's about performance-based, earning the favor of God by doing religious or spiritual activities, right? And Jesus is confronting this head on. Legalism is the belief that a person can earn or maintain right standing with God through strict adherence to rules, laws, or moral codes. Earning and performing. Growing up, I played basketball from 5th grade all the way through college at a high level. And so my whole life was basketball, and everything I wore was basketball. My wallpapers were basketball. And for a long time throughout high school, I had this wallpaper on my phone and a t-shirt that said, earned, not given. It was like a LeBron shirt or something like that after he won his first title in the NBA. It was earned, not given. Earned, not given. And that became like my motto. That became what I based my whole life around. It was like I had to work so hard over and over and over again. I would go after school to Green Meadows. If you guys know what Green Meadows, the old, facility, there's 3 basketball courts, so there's always space for me to play. I'd go to a place called Shoot 360 and shoot thousands of shots. Right? Over the summer, I had goals with my dad to make 10,000 shots in a summer. I had to earn my way for the spot that I wanted. I wanted to play college basketball, and I had to earn that. And so that became ingrained in my mind. And then I began walking with Jesus, and it just bled into my walk, where I had to relearn that actually that is the wrong mindset, right? I cannot earn my salvation. I can't earn favor with God. I cannot earn right standing with God. It is given, not earned, right? The Pharisees got it all wrong. And so often we get it all wrong. We will affirm, yes, God has given us this thing, but we will act like it's something that we have to earn. We will act and try and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and try and earn God's favor with him. And it's a tendency that we all fall into, where we begin to try and add things to the Christian life that are not necessary, and we think we have to earn our way to God, earn his forgiveness. And this notion is completely against the gospel. It's anti-gospel. Pastor and theologian John Stott says, the essence of legalism is trusting in religious activity rather than God. And so is that you? For a long time, and sometimes even now, it's me, where I begin to trust in my spiritual disciplines, right? After I sin and I fall short, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to go do this spiritual activity. I have to go read my Bible extra. I have to pray extra to earn God's forgiveness, and that's not the gospel. Are we putting our faith in our spiritual disciplines, or are we putting our faith in the Lord who has the authority over them, and the Lord who has given us salvation and gives us grace, right? It's nothing that we could earn. And continuing in the last part of the text, Jesus ends by saying this, showing his authority. He said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Jesus continues to speak, and he's completely redefining rest, redefining exactly what it means to rest. Jesus is saying that he is the Lord of the Sabbath again and again. He's making these bold claims again and again, saying that he is God over it. He's claiming to be the Messiah. And it is through this authority. Remember, he compares himself to David and David's authority that he had to be over that bread of presence. Jesus is doing the same thing. He's saying, I am over the Sabbath. I am Lord over it. You do not get to define what rest, what Sabbath actually looks like. Right? He's saying, I have this title, and I'm going to redefine what you think about what Sabbath actually is. As he has been this entire time, in the passage, he's changing everything, right? He's changing these spiritual disciplines. He's making the claim that rest is like fasting is not just checking a box every single week in your spiritual life. It's more than that. It's about relationship, right? He's making the claim that it's different. That's why we have a day created around it. And while this passage is not exactly teaching us directly on how to Sabbath, I still think it's important that we understand what Sabbath is, because it's a practice that can change your life. And so Sabbath simply means to rest, stop, or cease from work. It's a day dedicated to Jesus and resting in him. And so just 4 things that I think might help us shape Sabbath. These 4 things: stop, rest, delight, and worship. Stop. Sabbath is a day simply to stop. To stop working, to stop wanting, to stop worrying, ceasing from our work, both paid and unpaid, right? Even more, it's about stopping the inner kind of restlessness that we have, right? To stop the culture that's addicted to busyness and hurrying and productivity, right? And we trust in God. We stop. Pick a time to stop. Rest. This isn't just sleeping in or binging Netflix. This is about restoration. Rest is physical, but it's also spiritual, emotional, mental. We're resting from anxiety, hurry, performance, noise from the world. We're resting from all these things. True rest is about soul restoration that replenish us. Then delight. Sabbath day is a day dedicated to Psalm 37:4, to delight yourself in the Lord. A day to enjoy. Your Sabbath day should be filled with joy, right? It's about celebrating the goodness of creation, of relationships, of food, beauty, rest, and Jesus himself. Ask the question, what could you do for 24 hours that would fill your soul with deep joy? And then worship. Ultimately, the Sabbath is not about us. It's about God. It's a day to center our lives on him once again. Worship is both foundational and the goal of Sabbath. Time to reorient our lives around him. And that might include prayer, worship, through singing, scripture reading, silence, being still with God. We recenter ourselves on who God is. And we do have to be careful, right? We have to be careful that our Sabbath day, the tendency is that it can be hijacked into something that it's not. You know, it can be, Sabbath is not a day off. Sabbath is not just, all right, let me get the day off. I'm going to go mow the lawn. I'm going to go get all the chores done. I'm going to clean up the house. Like, that's not what Sabbath is. Sabbath is not just entertainment, right? Sabbath, like, entertainment can be a part of Sabbath, but if you're like, all right, it's my Sabbath time, I'm just going to turn on Netflix and just binge all day long because I got a new TV show I really like watching, that's not a Sabbath. Sabbath is not an escape from reality. It's not self-care. It's not a vacation, right? Sabbath is an intentional time to worship and center ourselves on Jesus, right? Sabbath can be orchestrated in the way that you love, right? My Sabbath day in a perfect world, it's been busy with new job and adjusting to that. We just got a puppy who's 12 weeks old. It's like, you don't ever get rest with that. Love him, but man. So I'm kind of adjusting what my Sabbath would look like. But if in my perfect day of Sabbath thing, it'd be getting up to spend time in scripture and prayer, sitting at my desk in my office at home, right? It'd be, I love to write, so it'd be maybe writing. It's spending time with my wife, Jenna, playing a game, chatting, going for a walk with our dog, something like that. Sometimes I love to watch movies, and so I will watch a movie that stirs my affections for Jesus, a movie that I know its themes, what it's talking about is going to cause me to worship God. Maybe it's getting together, eating good food with a friend. Like that's kind of what my Sabbath will look like. The point of the Sabbath is not be like, I have to follow these strict rules. Jesus is totally redefining it. Right? He's saying it's about me. It's about worshiping me. It's about being with me. He's showing us that guidelines for rest are helpful, and these things can lead us into deeper rest, but also they can pull us away because it's not as black and white as we think. It's not one size fits all, right? The goal of Sabbath is to draw us closer and closer to him, right? He reminds us that Sabbath was never meant to be a burden, but it was created to serve us and to bless us. Jesus, he flips the script on this. He flips the script, plot twist, rest is at its core about him. He changes everything in our lives, including rest. He changes where we find true rest. I want to read this verse for you in Matthew 11, verse 28 through 30. It says, come to me, all who labor or are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. This is not a call to just take a break from busy schedules. It's not just a call to step off the hamster wheel that we've built for ourselves. We will fill our calendars to the brim. We will wear busyness like a badge of honor. We will chase productivity, achievement, approval, thinking that they'll give us peace. But these words from Jesus are a deep promise that if we go to him, you will experience real and true rest. Right? That's what it's about, that we will find rest in not a formula, not more law, not more rules, but in Jesus alone. Right? Dwelling with him, being with him. And we know that it is through Jesus that we will have eternal rest. Revelation 21 talks about the fulfillment of that promise, the new heaven, the new earth where God will dwell with his people, and we will have ultimate rest that will last an eternity in his presence forever. And we have that because Jesus changes everything. He changes everything. Remember our plot twists all throughout? Our plot twists at the beginning through movies. Every good plot twist doesn't just surprise us. It changes how we see everything that came before, right? It sends you back to the beginning, rewatching scenes, rethinking assumption, realizing that you missed the signs all along. And for the Pharisees in this passage, they missed it. They didn't understand it. They missed the signs all along. Jesus is the plot twist in this story. He steps into the world full of religion, ritual, legalism, spiritual performance, and he flips it on its head, right? He doesn't just tweak the system. He completely redefines it. He changes how we see God, not as a taskmaster, but as a present bridegroom. He changes how we engage with spiritual disciplines, not to earn favor, but to have relationship with him, right? Jesus changes everything. But the most shocking twist of all is the one that no one saw coming. Well, they would have if they would have been paying attention, right? The one who has authority over fasting, over Sabbath, and Scripture itself would lay down his life for everybody. The one who came to give rest would be crucified on a cross, who would hang there and then die, and then 3 days later rise again to give us new life, offering grace that can only be found in him. And today, he's still changing everything. As I said in my prayer earlier, there was a student at camp that for the first time in his life, he got to experience real and true rest. And he now is realizing that Jesus changed everything for him. His life is completely different now because of what Jesus did on the cross. Jesus is still rewriting stories. He's still breaking the grip of empty rituals and religion. He's still inviting weary hearts into rest with him. He did it at high school summer camp, and he can do it with us today. Jesus is changing everything. Jesus changes everything. The only question for us is, have you let him change you, and will you?